Welcome, and thank you for joining us today at IBM for our Mid-Market Tech Talks. We do these once a month. Today's session will be on will your company survive when bad thing happens? We're going to talk about business continuity, disaster recovery, and data and cyber resilience as a broad brush. And thinking these things won't happen, well, guess what? The issue from just the cyber resilience aspect is it's not if it's going to happen, it's when and how often. And everyone knows of the very high profile recent cyber attacks. JBS, the largest meatpacking company in the world, which is based in Brazil, but with operations all over the world. For those of us in the States, of course, Continental Pipeline in the Eastern US, they paid a $4 million ransom. Luckily, the FBI was able to cover half of it, but still they lost $2 million. And if the FBI hadn't been so vigilant, they would have lost $4 million. And of course, the same week as Continental Pipeline, the Irish healthcare system was shut down by a malware ransomware attack. So this is a big deal. And then, of course, obviously, recently we just had, of course, Hurricane Ida here in the southeast part of the United States. And it even caused a tornado in part of Philadelphia. Hard to believe, but they actually had a tornado caused. So these things do happen. And of course, as many of you know, the most common form of data loss is not malware, ransomware, not that that's not on the rise dramatically, or a natural disaster, but it's still fire in a data center. Even for those of you that are co-load or have your own data center with fire suppressant systems, it's still fire. And this whole topic is such a big issue, particularly from the cyber and data resilience perspective, that a couple of weeks ago, the Biden administration hosted in Washington, D.C., a conference on cybersecurity. This included a number of high-tech companies, including IBM. Our CEO, Arvind Krishna, was there, as well as several government agencies. And while you think, well, they're probably talking about attacks on the US government or counties or states, no. The message was that cybersecurity, whether you're the global Fortune 2000 to the smallest company, is an issue for everyone. And in fact, after the event, Arvind published a blog on LinkedIn, and he talked about the 5 key things that IBM can help you do to avoid cybersecurity. And he pointed out that this whole cybersecurity issue is not going away. It's probably going to be one of the biggest issues in IT for the next 5 to 10 years. No kidding. And in fact, in the Fortune 500 survey of CEOs, and also one by KPMG of mid-market CEOs, the number one threat, both sets of CEOs, both the Fortune 500 as well as the mid-market CEOs, the number one threat they brought up to their business was cybersecurity. So we're going to talk about that today. Joining me is going to be Don O'Neill. Don, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Eric. Hello, everybody. This is Don O'Neill with Accelerate Networks. We're based in San Jose, California, and we're a system integrator and prominent partner with IBM. We talked about the entire ecosystem of technology solutions, and that includes networking, storage, and of course, cybersecurity. And as it pertains to IBM, the discussions we're having focus on storage, data, and the mediums and the next generation products. And what's refreshing is to have discussions that have more of a total ecosystem approach where we can blend in and layer in solutions that are on the cybersecurity side from the people that we're actually partnered with on primarily on storage. So it's something that resonates with our customers that we're talking to on a regular basis, and knowing that they have many choices. There's several thousand cybersecurity companies and more growing, but then to have it with a company such as IBM and their staying power and the resources that they bring, it makes it a more cohesive discussion. So thanks, Eric.
Great, thank you, Don. Also joining us today from IBM Lab Services is Robert Acosta. Robert, why don't you talk a little about what you do and how you work with customers for IBM? Robert, you're on mute.
Thank you, Eric. I'm Robert Acosta. I'm with IBM Lab Services. I'm the North American Business Development Leader for Storage brand. And I want to say this because I've been at IBM just 4 years, which is not a lot. But I've been a client all my career. So I'm a lot like you guys out there on this call that are looking for what to do in the technology world, make decisions that's going to be better for your business continuity, your disaster recovery. Who we are, Lab Services aligned with the IBM strategic priorities, and we offer infrastructure services to help our business partners as well as our clients build the foundation for a smarter enterprise. We are here to help you to be successful with IBM solutions and technology across all brands, storage, power, and Z. Where we fit, well, we fit in pre and post sales. We do assessments, so we provide a large spectrum of services from a consultative basis, as well as assisting with assessments and whatever the case may be that you may have a need for. So we're here to help you be successful, and I'm only a phone call away, so I look forward to hearing from many of you in the near future.
Great, thank you, Robert. Well, let's get to the questions of the panel. For those of you that have been on with us before, our whole focus here is to be the sports panel. We are like sports talk radio, except we're talking about very important things here that can dramatically impact your mid-market business. So I'm going to start first with Don. So obviously people use the term business continuity a lot. When you are talking to your customers, what do you talk about when you engage with them and talk to them about business continuity and the things that they need to do?
Yeah, so I'll frame this with active discussions that we're having with customers of ours. In fact, IBM storage customers right now, and it's specific to healthcare organizations. And these are community healthcare organizations where security is a very sensitive and upfront topic right now. When you think about walking in as a patient for an appointment, of course, they don't want you to be using any kind of mobile device. And it's not only because of the interruption that would take place in a busy medical environment, but it's also they're very concerned about the security of patient records. And that's driven by HIPAA and the federal regulations, everything associated with that. And they don't want a camera or a recording device or anything coming next to medical records or things along that line. As I look at our customers and their websites, they talk about what they can do on a proactive basis for healthcare and then on a reactive basis, but also their websites really highlight in lengthy terms what they're doing for security for their customers. And recently, we have been introduced to this assessment that we have co-branded with IBM, and we're in the process of administering that to these IBM healthcare customers that we have to strengthen what they're doing, particularly right now, everything's so virtual. And you have telemedicine appointments via your laptop or via your phone. There's all kinds of records that are going back and forth. Coming into the office may not be as a regular occurrence because of medical protocol. And so as you layer into that and you're exchanging information, tests are being given on a regular basis, this is something that's heightened. And to be able to use a tool such as this assessment that we as a partner of IBM can administer ourselves and come back with some very salient and vital information for these organizations, it helps them because they don't necessarily have a bench of cybersecurity and cyber resilience specialists. And so it's just part of an ongoing discussion as we layer in the security elements of what IBM has to offer, and particularly just awareness altogether.
Okay, great. Thank you, Don. Now, Robert, obviously you are advising customers all over North America. How do you play into them what they need to consider from a business continuity perspective to help their businesses not end up going out of business when bad things happen? What are the things that you recommend and talk to them about from a strategy perspective?
Yes, I think it's important that they have a plan and prepare and practice those three principles around what I just said. But you have to, what do you do in the day to protect your data? What are you going to do? What did you do? What do you want to do going forward? So there's the traditional method that we've always had with disaster recovery, backup, and high availability. But there's this new thing now called cyber data resiliency for storage. So that is key to protecting your blood of your company is the data. So we want to make sure that you're aware of what we bring to the table from an IBM perspective with all of our tools that can help you accomplish those tasks. We have safeguarded copy is a new thing on our flash systems that allow immutable copies that you can accomplish where you have a protection within the environment. We have a cyber resiliency assessments that we can help you with at no cost to you. It's an investment from IBM to our clients through our beat as well as through our business partners to help you understand your current estate, and we help you with illustrating to you what it looks like today and the roadmap of where you need to be tomorrow for data resiliency around your storage. So there's all different ways to look at this, but what you have to ask yourself is what's important to you to keep your business running during a disaster situation, a ransomware attack, cyber threat, whatever the case may be, because you don't want to be that company or that person that got caught. And I'll talk a little bit about a company, ABC, I used to be with. I think back just 4 years ago, we had 3 side replication, we had asynchronous, synchronous, we had it all covered. We bought 2 of everything. We were kind of prepared, but what we did not have is this new component, the resiliency behind protecting your data. And that's very important because at the end of the day, being at this company, I was privy to having the FBI come in and talk to us about cyber security. And this was 7 years ago, and it's still applicable today, what's happening. So it's important that we're here to help you understand what your needs are to protect your assets, protect your data, to keep your business running.
Okay, great. Well, as I listen to both those responses, it sounds like there's traditional business continuity and disaster recovery, fire, flood, earthquake. Hope I didn't just jinx myself since I'm coming to you live from Silicon Valley. So that's the traditional side, but now it looks like the aperture has been opened up to include cyber and data resiliency. And just to drive that point home, since both of you brought it up and you're both clearly talking not just about the traditional way of having business continuity, but now the new way in the world of cyber attack, just to give people a couple things. So industry estimates are that globally in 2021, cybercrime will cost companies and governments $6 trillion. I kid you not. And then the average cost of a data breach, so a malware ransomware attack, that's on the average, is now at $4.25 million. So if you're a big company, you don't like that. And if you're a small company, it's brutal. Remember, Continental Pipeline was 4.2 million. Actually, July of 2020, the University of California, San Francisco, they paid 2 million. JBS, we talked about, was 11, and the University of Illinois Computer Center has documented that a large Asian auto manufacturer, they paid $74 million in ransom. So this is not some sort of fly-by-night sort of issue. Okay, great. So the second thing I'd like to come to is when you look at, you talk now about the strategies and what you do from that perspective. But Robert, you talk about what are probably the top 3 actual tactical things you recommend. You talked about the planning, the practice, but then what do you say, here's the top 3 things you need to do now to have the business continuity and now this broader topic. So what are the top 3 to 4 things you would tell an end user they need to be doing to get what you recommend? And then of course, doing the practicing, et cetera. What are those top 3 to 4 things, Robert?
I think that you have to look at what it's important to you from your data. What kind of data how you want to protect the data, and then you need to understand what components you want to use to leverage the automation around the technology to help you accomplish what you're trying to do. But I think you have to classify your data, determine what's going to keep your business running from a protection perspective, and then move forward with the type of technology you want to use, whether it's going to be data resiliency with safeguarded copy and those kind of components.
Okay. Don, what are the 3 to 4 things you guys recommend now, opening up the aperture beyond traditional business continuity, but now to enhance it with cyber and data resilience? What are the top 3 to 4 things you would recommend to the end users?
So every customer that we have is has a tape backup in place, and that could be for a variety of different areas. That's very important, whether it's something that's going to happen at a facility, whether it's weather related or some kind of attack, malware attack, or what have you. So it's recommended, and it's something that everybody agrees with. Of course, it's just kind of that cornerstone to start the discussions. Then we have a mix of customers, and as far as what they're doing, which is not unique, you're going to have customers that will have their data in their own facilities. You'll have some that go out to the cloud with a hyperscale player, and then you have people that go to the data center. And so each one of those is going to have a best practices tactical measure that they will use. And I think about our one customer that's well-funded as a startup, and they have some innovative lab automation that's very relevant today. When you think about it, they're using robotics and cryogenic storage and just accelerating the lab process for research and making that available. And so when I have discussions with their executives, they talk about IP. And so how much of that is available on the web? How much of that discussion is available via an NDA? And then how much is kept just within the employee on trade secrets? That's all classified. And then when you go to a patent, as you go there, that becomes public information. So there's different layers of how you protect that information. They go to AWS, and so they feel like, well, gosh, that's saving me a lot of money. They've got everything in place, but there's measures to go beyond that as far as being able to replicating their data. We're having discussions with them right now about that. And so they're building up their IT organization. We're consulting with them, giving them some guideline and framework to think about things beyond the givens that they have in place with best measures with their employees. But I say, yeah, terrific, go to one of the hyperscale players, but then you can add another layer of security onto that with the discussions that we're having with them. I'll contrast that to a biopharma research company, and they go through the process of 1.5 years research to go to a next level product that's going to go in the marketplace. And they go through all the research. They have a team of about a dozen people, and they go through clinical trials, and then they submit to the FDA. They're submitting 85,000 pages that will be going to them. So you can imagine the research and the time and everything that goes into that. And so there are additional measures that they can have in place as far as replicating their data. Contrast to the other company, the lab automation, they're not comfortable going to the cloud. They want to have it in their facilities, but how they mirror that data within their facility and perhaps in other locations that they have, we're in discussions with them on that to safeguard that very valuable research information that they have.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you. So, Robert, one of the things you mentioned, of course, is Lab Services offers their free cyber resilience assessment. And one of the buzzwords that many people in the mid-market are not familiar with is probably the Nist framework. Can you give the end user sort of a rough idea of what is Nist, what does it deliver, and why has the industry focused on this framework as a way to look at cyber and data resilience?
Right, thanks for reminding me. Yes, we have what's called the CIRSA, stands for the Cyber Incident the Cyber Incident Response Storage Assessment. It's provided through IBM Lab Services as an investment to our clients and our through our business partners for customers who want to participate in this assessment. It's it's about a 1 to 5 week time frame of commitment with 4 different steps of getting to the discovery and what we're going to talk and the prepare. And then we go off and we provide you a comprehensive illustration and a roadmap moving forward. And that is offered at no cost to the client. And it's based on the Nist framework, as Eric said, which consists of 5 components: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So, you have to think about all of those 5 components because they're key and critical to how you're going to create this resiliency around your environment and your data and your infrastructure. So for the CIRSA program, feel free to reach out to me through the through this WebEx session, and I'll be more than happy to get you connected and how we can help you assess your environment from a data storage perspective.
Robert, a quick follow-up question to that. Is the Nist framework a US only sort of security thing, or is it something that's been adopted across the world, since some of our end users may have operations, do business outside the United States? So is Nist a US only thing or sort of an international standard?
I believe I'm going to say I think it's a international standard. I believe it is. I can't tell you that 100%, but I'll take that approach right now.
Okay, great. So Don, want to talk a little about, the response that a company needs to have. So when you look and you're talking to them about their strategy, what are sort of the 5 or 6 things you say, when this happens, you need to respond? What are the things that you looked at? For example, there's a pandemic, something. So what are the things where you say, by the way, when this happens, this is when you would sort of kick off the cybersecurity actual tactical deployment, or actually do something about it? What are the 4 or 5 things you say you got to really watch for these things, and then you engage and get going? This is after you've already put the plan together for them. When would they actually execute the plan, like really have to do the work? What are the things that would indicate from your perspective that they're actually having a cyber attack or have something they need to worry about? What are the 4 or 5 things they should be looking for day to day?
Yeah, so IT organizations need to be familiar with the trends that are taking place, whether it's phishing, coming into your website or e-commerce site, and have the proactive tools to be alerted to that. And so then educating the employees on how to respond to that and take the pragmatic measures to just block it off, don't react in any fashion to that. And then working to, ideally, you'll have a proactive tool in place that can understand this from the beginning. And then based on that, okay, let's work to shut down this nefarious attack that's happening at this point, having the tools in place in order to make that happen. And then the data that could be vulnerable, knowing that you have a way to replicate that vulnerable data that's taking place there. I think about we're becoming more and more familiar and bringing this up to our customers, common customers with IBM, and that's safeguarded copy, and just how that has kind of a comprehensive approach from, just as you couch that whole scenario, from what do you do to have the measures in place? How do you identify it in the early stages? How do you react to it? And then how do you do something to protect your data while this is going on, and then diminish it altogether? And so I'm finding that as we have discussions and bring in subject matter experts with our friends from IBM, that safeguarded copy really resonates with a more comprehensive approach to doing things and addressing the key points that you want to when you're having a cyber resilient discussion.
And if I can add to that, Eric, IBM Lab Services can help you accomplish those things with safeguarded copy and some of the things that Don talked about. So, we're here as your third arm, your third set of eyes to help you accomplish some of your modernization around data resiliency, business continuity, and disaster recovery.
So Robert, my follow-up question is, obviously both you and Don have talked about putting together a plan, and you both have mentioned practice. So what are your recommendations? How often should they practice? What are the top three or four things they should be practicing? along the plans? Because you help put together the plan, but obviously you don't do it for them, right? So what are the things you tell them they need to do when they practice? And what are the things they had watched for to make sure that the practice actually works? Because the practice doesn't work, just like in football, it's not going to work during the game. So what do you tell them to do at the tactical level after IBM Lab Services help put together the plan? What do they need to do to actually do it right and get a practice going?
Okay, I think I'm gonna talk based on my experience with this large company I work, company ABC. We had 54 petabytes of capacity. We had block file. We had mainframe. So we had it all. And we did a lot of practicing. We did a disaster recovery test every 4 to 6 months. It was a major effort. It took 12 to 16 hours to do, but it was a planned orchestrated event because without practice, you're not going to have success. So what I think is part of the plan is you lay out a run book. We lay out how you want to execute the plan. Have automation infused into there to kind of help you position your storage environment where it needs to be positioned for the failover systems to come up. So I think those are key components is a documented run book plan, the LOBs that require a 2-hour recovery, a 10-hour recovery. We had 12 hours to recover, but we had some lines of business that had 2-hour recovery time. We had to be up on the DR side within 2 hours. So they were treated special. So all of those processes and execution of your automation scripts or leveraging our tools like copy services to kind of position your DR site to be ready. Because without practice, as like Eric said, you're not going to win the game. And I think it takes a lot of planning, preparation, and practice to execute an efficient recovery plan. Because to say you have all these tools and all these great systems, if you never practice, you're not going to be successful, I don't think. So I think that's critical to, besides selecting the business continuity, disaster recovery, cyber resiliency plan you want today, make sure you carry that plan that's documented once we leave with automation infused into it as well. And then you execute the plan based on the run book and the timeline of the LOBs and their needs to recover their systems on the other side.
Now, Robert, a follow-up question to that. That's very comprehensive. How often do you actually fake an earthquake or fake a cyber attack and actually execute, in a microcosm, but a practice, like literally the way the football team, they practice before they get on the field of the game, and whether it be the kickoff, whether it be the handing the ball off to the running back, but they practice it, then they do it again. So how often did you guys execute a practice that you thought would have you prepared if it was a real event? How often did you practice these things?
We did ancillary DR tests for small LOBs that had more stringent regulations from the Federal Reserve, because we did a lot of business for the Federal Reserve Bank. But for the large scope of over 1,000 applications, we did it every 6 months. Now, was that enough? No, but that's the reason why we had some of these other core businesses that were part of that ABC company that had more stringent requirements to practice. So we practiced probably every 2 months with one particular LOB that was isolated and had their own sys storage, their own replication components, and they're able to do that kind of thing. But it was different levels of practice depending on what LOB it was. From the enterprise wide, it was once every 6 months.
Okay.
For the smaller, like for the small businesses that are on this call, you can look at our LOBs were like small businesses within a large business, and that's what we practice every 2 months, every 2 to 3 months.
Okay, so it sounds like if I'm a medium to small company, I should probably practice this at least twice a year, if not once a quarter.
I would think,
And
yes,
to do
100%. Make sure all those processes that you have in place are running and they're effective, and you're able to bring up your systems within the timeline you expect to bring them up.
Now, as part of the IBM Lab Services work, if someone comes back to you and says, "Hey, Robert, we tried this and it didn't work," does IBM go back in and hone the plan for them? I mean, and try to help them work through that, because obviously it didn't work, right? They got stopped at the goal line. They didn't get the touchdown. So how do you help them after that? And I assume, they do the practice on their own, because we can't be there all the time at IBM, right? So they've got to do it as if we're not there. So then what happens if it doesn't work? What do you do?
It all depends. We have to figure out what went wrong. Step out of the forest, look at the trees. What went wrong? Was it something that we guided them to this down this path incorrectly? But at the end of the day, we have to look at what went wrong, how to address it, and move forward. If we were part of that package that we delivered, we would have to come back in and kind of help them understand the scope of what happened and how we can move this forward. Would that be another engagement? I don't know. It depends on what the situation was and how the plan was executed. Was it something that we documented incorrectly with them and it fell apart? I think we can't really say here what we would do in that case, but at the end of the day, we will not leave them out there hanging. We're here to help them.
Okay, great. So now, Don, we've talked a lot now for a half an hour about how cybersecurity goes beyond regular business continuity and disaster recovery. One of the things I think maybe many people are thinking, this sounds like it's really expensive. So, independent of the fact that many companies can't handle an $11 million ransom demand, but independent of that sort of high level, sort of when you're talking to your mid and small companies, what do you say you probably need to budget to do this, effectively and keep your business up and going? And in short, make sure your company does survive when the bad thing happens. What sort of rule of thumb do you give your customers?
Yeah, great question, Eric. And so there's the solution itself, but then it's the wraparound plan that goes with that. And if you have an organization that can, a technology partner that can work with you and develop the plan, and that the organization is going to buy into and adhere to it and have that in place, that's the backbone of everything that's going on. And so it's going to range depending upon the size of the company that you have out there. And if we have a community healthcare organization that has thousands of patients that they're seeing, that could be different than a research organization and what they have in place. And so there's some common sense that goes in it. And to tell you the truth, I don't necessarily have a formula per se, but it gets a lot of attention. I'm going to kind of circle back to something that you mentioned, open up on that last question with Robert, and talking about the steps. And it's not so much the capital investment as much as slowing down as an organization to take stock of what your business is and what you need to keep secure, and have a plan that's not only bought into by the IT organization, but the executives. And then there's a team that's going to be behind that plan that's going to make themselves available to execute on it, but also educate the rest of the organization. So it's something that's adhered to across the board. And then from that, just knowing when and how and why to disconnect, and then go into a recovery mode and a cycle along that line. And gosh, just hearing Robert today and knowing the resources that IBM has that they bring to bear into something like that to help design and put something together along that line based on the experiences that they have, that the best practices can apply enterprise global customers, but certainly to the mid and small, medium-sized business markets as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Well, as we come to wrap it up, I'd like to ask both of you the same question. We're going to start with Robert. So we've talked about a lot of different things today, Robert. What are the top 3 things people need to really think about to make this happen, to make it a reality for their company? What are the top 3 things they need to get on and get going so that they don't have a ransom that they have to pay? What are the top 3 things that you would recommend?
Our first thing, they have to ask themselves, how important is their data to them? And then when you ask that question to yourself, well, I can't run my business. Okay. Then my next steps, what can I do to protect my data? How can I keep the bad guys out? Because a lot of times the bad guys get in, and the next step is then how to keep them off my data. That's where you have to leverage technology to maximize that coverage, that protection, that blanket you need, so you're not caught in a ransom situation. Because when you're an SMB, you don't have the millions of dollars that a big company like ABC that I worked with that can drop $50 million at a drop of a hat if they had to. So I think that's critical, is ask yourself how important your data is. If you want to segment it out to different LOBs, this one's more important than this one, but you got to remember, sometimes those have back-end connections and they rely on one another from an application perspective. So you have to be careful when you start pulling it apart. So I think when the SMB, the beauty there is they're small, they can be contained, and it's just making the investment. Don't be caught without that insurance policy, if you will, because that's what it comes down to, is protecting your assets and ensuring that you continue to run your business when bad things happen. And that's the goal.
Don, same question. The top 2, 3, 4 things when you're out there to tell these small and medium companies, here's what you need to do, really make this happen and make it reality for your company.
Yeah, so Robert did a great job of framing it, and I can't go much further than that other than say that the discussions we're having in encouraging our customers to assess what they're doing and to take advantage of the assessment tool, certainly they understand data is important, but then what are they doing to protect their data, as Robert suggested? And they don't know where to start. But by going through the assessment tool, it gets them to slow down and think about their environment and what they're doing. And so there's a whole arc of a process that goes through that. And then to be able to get information that's tailored specifically from them that comes through that great assessment tool, to have those open discussions and evaluate different avenues that they can be looking to, as Robert said, protect the data that's just so salient to running their business.
Great. Well, I really want to thank you guys for all of your time today and all the wisdom you've imparted to our end users. Data and cyber resilience is no joke. Cybercrime, unfortunately, is here to stay. And if anything, it's going to get worse, not better. So, and again, as one of the things we pointed out at the very beginning, everyone needs to realize that there are several elements to a comprehensive cybersecurity strategy, whether you're a small company, a medium company, or the global Fortune 2000. And if you leave storage out of that equation, as Robert and Don have so eloquently put it, you will leave yourselves open to a gap, which is not good. Mark Newhall is joined us as well. Mark, is there anything in the chat or any questions before we close out today?
There were 2 short questions, Eric. The first one was someone wrote and said, I use security vendors that promise to catch cyber threats at the edge of my network. Do I really need to also employ cyber vendors that promise to catch threats inside my IT estate?
Okay, Don, why don't you take that question first? And Robert, if you could give some feedback first. So Don, what's your guys' opinion? What do you recommend to real end users when that question comes up?
Yeah, great question. And from our point of view, you need both to be prepared in place, and a comprehensive solution that addresses cyber resiliency is going to have both of those built into it. So you got to prepare for the unknown that's going to come in, and I don't think you can plan on catching everything. And so it's good to have both from my point of view.
Okay, Robert, what do we recommend?
This is a good question. From my intro, I talked about my past life. I had the beauty of having the FBI come and talk to us every 6 months. Guys, they get in past that first gate. There's a lot of times, because the FBI told us, listen, they get in, the bad guys find ways to get behind the first wall. So I agree with Don, you need double protection, so it's imperative that you really think about it and the importance of, your data is like the lifeblood of your company. You cannot run it without it. So if I'm hearing this from the FBI, when I was at this company, they came in and to talk to us about us, I was intrigued on how much they told us about what's happening in the real world. They never talked about companies, but they said the bad guys are always they can get past your network many times, but it's that extra layer of protection that we all want to keep them off your data and your storage, because once they compromise your app, you're toast. So I think the full spectrum of data resiliency is needed in today's world.
Okay, Mark, the second question that came in.
The second question was the user said, I encrypt the information on the drives in my network. Aren't I protected from a ransomware attack?
So the answer is not necessarily. Okay, data encryption really helps you from a data theft perspective. You've encrypted the data, okay, and you're doing that to keep, really, it's more of a theft protection thing. From a malware and a ransomware aspect, data encryption is not necessarily what it's going to do. So for example, part of malware is corrupting the data. Encryption does not prevent data corruption. Encryption makes the data unreadable unless you have the encryption key to open it up. But it doesn't mean you can't corrupt that data. So malware, for example, would corrupt that data, and even though it's encrypted, make it completely unusable. So that would be that. So I'd like to thank our august team for helping us today. This has been the third session in a row where we've hit on data and cyber resiliency. Please remember, and there will be a replay available. It'll be available no later than early next week. So if some of the people at your company could not hear this and were unable to attend, it'll be available on a replay on a IBM YouTube channel. So we'll get that back out to everybody who attended. And then lastly, IBM Storage also offers a free cyber resilience assessment. It's slightly different from lab services. It's really more of a paper exercise and is a little bit faster than what they do, not as comprehensive as the lab services. And it is heterogeneous. So the free cyber resilience storage assessment from the storage division covers not just IBM storage, but for any of you that are heterogeneous in your storage estate, we look really at the data and then say, we think you should be air gapping, or we think you should be encrypting, and here's why. And that would apply not only to data that's sitting on an IBM storage solution, but our competitors as well. So without further ado, I'd like to thank you again. Please look forward to the event on October 7th. We will be changing the topic, obviously, because we've done data and cyber resilience. We are going to come back to that later in the year, but our topic is going to be around containers. Containers is all the rage, and not just with big companies, but with small companies as well. In the old days, of course, all applications sat bare metal right on the servers. You then had the rise of virtualization, VMware, Hyper-V, and a virtualization layer in between the application and the actual storage and the servers. And these days, you've now got a new technology that was developed in the open source community called containers. So we're going to explore containers for small and medium business, the pros and the cons, and how it could benefit you. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and we can't wait to see you on October 7th as we talk about storage and containers for the small and medium business. Thanks again, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.